40 years ago, a fantasy role-playing game was released that became synonymous with role-playing in Sweden. That's Drakar och. Today, that game has been reimagined for a new edition and being introduced to international markets for the very first time. Drakar och, or DRAGONBANE, as it will be called in English, is Free League's next foray into fantasy role-playing. This game features amazing art by Johan Egerkrans and is a D20 system that is surely going to be enjoyed by new and existing tabletop role-playing gamers alike. Today we have the game's lead designer Tomas Härenstam on the stream to talk more about what it's been like developing a new edition for this much beloved game and what this line will entail based on backer support, and answer questions from the live viewers about DRAGONBANE. I will remind viewers that if you are interested in anything that we are talking about today, the Kickstarter still has about 2 weeks left, and already over 8,700 backers and numerous stretch goals unlocked. So please take a look at it. The link is in the description below. So yeah, it's just an amazing product, and we're really, really excited at Free League Publishing to put this out in this new edition for a much larger audience. So without further ado, let's bring on the man you're here to see. And that, of course, is Tomas Härenstam. Tomas, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Good.
Excellent. Kickstarter is live, and it's been going for about a week now. If I did my math correctly, maybe it's a little over a week now, I guess.
Yeah, just over a week now. Yep.
It's crazy. Like I said, we've got 8,700 backers already. It's really great to see the support that's come in for Free League Publishing on this product.
Yeah, it's it's great to see. You never know, and especially this one, since it's Kickstarters are always a bit of a risk and a chance, and you don't know where they will end up. But this one particularly, since it was not a known brand or anything like that, so
sure.
So yeah, it's great to see the interest. I mean, from the Swedish side, that's not too surprising that there would be an interest, because this is like the RPG over here. But from the international side, it's really cool to see the interest and the great support for this game.
Yeah, it's awesome. We've already got quite a few questions in the chat. I'll remind folks that if there's a question you'd like to ask, put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. We've got about 45 minutes today. So, Tomas, this is something, like you said, this is a game that has been in Sweden for. I mean, it's pretty much like when you talk about role playing in Sweden, this is pretty much the game that everybody immediately goes to.
Yeah, it's like the kind of game that even if you never played a role playing game, you have heard of Drakar at some point. I mean, at least most people, and especially back. I mean, it's always been the game over here, but the real RPG craze, I guess, started in the 80s, and then this game was everywhere. It was in all the toy stores. It was in most homes. It was like almost as common as having like Monopoly or something at home. You would find.
Wow, really? That's awesome.
It was everywhere. So it's definitely part of the DNA of Swedish role playing. And it came out in 82. The edition that really kicked off was the second edition that was out in 84. And I think that had such dominance that actually Dungeons and Dragons never really quite made it. It was never a big thing back then. It existed, obviously, but it was not the RPG, because that place had already been taken by Drakar och. So that has, I mean, it's not quite the same anymore, but that was definitely the case back then.
Very cool. Now, this product, I'm going to put the contents of this box set is just amazing. We've got adventure books, dice, initiative cards, map, cardboard standees. Is this similar to what the product looked like when it was first launched? Is this?
You mean the original, the old versions, or not exactly? There's actually some more stuff unlocked. This is not the latest one. We have some treasure cards and a battle map as well. So it's actually going to be even more stuff than you saw on there. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff, I think the early editions, there were several editions and they were a bit different. But having like standees, like the paper standees, that was a thing back then. So those are a bit of an homage to the early editions, but no, there's more stuff in it now. I mean, back then it was basically, you know, a booklet, some dice, and maybe like a small battle map and a standee. But so there is more stuff now than it was used to be back then.
Wow, yeah, no, it's just chock full of items now in this new product. It's amazing. Now, how long have you been developing this new edition, and when, you know, is this something that you've always kind of, is this like a dream job, like a dream project for you? Is this something that you're like, oh man, this is the one property that, like, if I could make my mark on, or if I could kind of, it would just be like the pinnacle of what I've been doing right along?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, to some extent. I mean, that's kind of the you know, what's so great about doing this stuff is that, you know, most projects that I worked on are like dream projects. So it's hard to say, I mean, to rank them, but
Sure.
Definitely this one has been on our radar for a very long time, and even since really first started out 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now, almost. This doing a new edition of Drakar och was one of the first things that we kind of tried to be able to do. It was not possible at the time because the brand and the IP was owned by another company, so we were not able to do anything back then. We had a discussion about doing something in 2012, so 10 years ago now, doing a licensed version or something, but that never panned out. But definitely, yes. I mean, especially for the Swedish context, doing a new version of Drakar och is like, you know, obviously the big prize. So that has definitely been part of Free League from the very start. Also, I think both Symbaroum and Forbidden Lands, they own much of their kind of DNA to Drakar och. They're both, in a sense, two interpretations of Drakar och, of very different. I mean, they're quite different from each other, but they both can clearly trace their heritage back to the Drakar och and playing Drakar och. So that's definitely part of our DNA as role players. But this specific edition, what happened was that about a bit over a year ago, I think it was in May or June, we finally managed to agree with the previous license owner so that we could acquire this brand name and the name and make a new edition. So when that happened, so that was quite unexpected and sudden. Then things kicked into motion. So now we've been working. I mean, the actual design process and work has been going now for about a year. So it's quite fast in that sense.
Excellent. And I'll remind folks that if you're interested in just trying out the game, there's a quick start that's available. It's all laid out and it's 44 pages. It's beautifully done, and you can actually get a taste of what this new edition is going to be like. I actually got to that's the one thing that I downloaded onto my tablet while I was flying to PAX West. I got to read it and kind of dive into it a little bit more since I had a few hours to kill while I was over at PAX West, which was great. Now, while folks are looking at the quick start, they're going to see some art, and the art in this game is amazing. It's by Johan Egerkrantz, who we know from Vase, and
yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that, having collaborating with Johan again, and I know that there's some of this is existing art, some of it is in brand new pieces. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And
yeah,
while you're
sure.
talking about that, I'll put some images on the screen.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we kind of realized, I mean, we've been working with Johan Egerkrantz for, like you mentioned, for Vaesen for quite some time, and we know him. I mean, he's a friend of Free League, and he's a big role player from back in the day, and so he's very much part of our kind of closest, you know, circle of friends. So working with him is great, and he's a fantastic artist. So for this new edition, when we started out, we felt that it was like the obvious choice, because we also felt that we need to make our mark or our version. I mean, Drakar och has been that big generic fantasy game that you could play serious stories or lighthearted stories, and it's very open. And it's still that open, but we still wanted to embrace the kind of more lighthearted side, maybe, of what Drakar och has always been. Also to contrast perhaps this game, Dragonbane, from our other titles, which are a bit more, bit more grimdark, perhaps, or you had more dark fantasy like Symbaroum, whereas this one is more like lighter touch and more, So that's kind of, we wanted to highlight that aspect. That aspect has always been there, like the Drakar och has always had the funny ducks and stuff. So it's not new, it's not changed. It's just that we wanted to emphasize it a little bit more, and that doing that. One way of doing it is through art, and Johan's art is just perfect. That style with a slightly cartoony, but very kind of a but still moody style that he has. It's just perfect. And like you mentioned, some of the art is actually pre-existing, some is brand new, because Johan Egerkrans also illustrated there was a previous edition of Drakar och only in Swedish. I mean, I think our version is like the 10th edition, depending on how you count. There's ongoing debate on how to actually which editions are actual editions, and Anyway, so about 10 different editions, and the previous one came out in 2016, and which was labeled very much as a retro edition that very much went back to the very early editions. Our version does that to some extent, but it's also very much focused on making a game for the here and the now. But one thing that Johan Egerkrans illustrated that edition as well, and we felt that art it's part now of the Drakar och DNA. It's very perfect for the game. So we felt that it would be a shame not to use any of that, because it's just it just nails the tone so perfectly, and so we decided together with Johan, of course, and that we'd use some of this art again for this game as well. But it's not all old art; it's also lots and lots of new art by Johan. So it's, both old and new.
Excellent. Yeah, it's whenever we have his work with Vaesen on at the booth or anything online, people just rave about it. So it's nice to see him on this project as well. All right, let's get to some of the questions now.
Sure.
We're going to go right through here, and let's get to Darren. Darren asks, question, my group is pretty tired of D&D at this point. What will make this fresh and different from that game, which is the obvious comparison?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are some similarities, certainly. I mean, they're both D20 based, and they're both kind of open, generic fantasy, if you will. They kind of, it's not super specific setting wise, so that there are some similarities there. I mean, comparison wise, I would say this game is probably easier to run at the table. It's faster. It's not as focused on character progression. There is character progression for sure, but it's not a super huge part of the game as I think D&D, where it's very much focused on your build, and that can be a lot of fun. But this one is a bit more. It's faster to get to the table, faster to play, and it's perfect for one shots, short campaigns, sure, but also one shot. So it's that kind of game that you can just, if you're not sure what to play, if you don't have anything major prepared, this is so easy to play that you can basically take it out, read an adventure for 5 minutes and run it, because it's just that fast. So I think it's a good game. I mean, for long campaigns certainly, but also just if you want to change it up, try something different for just a single session. I think this is a good game for that, because it's that you get lots of fun at the table in a short amount of time.
I saw a comment on the Kickstarter comments that someone said that they were going to be using this as their camper game, like where they bring rocks camping. Too. Yeah, I love that idea.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
We should use that, like, the camper game.
The camper game, yes, absolutely. All right, Darren also has another question. Will the game have the equivalent of feats or talents, things that are special abilities that will set one adventurer apart from others?
Yes, there will be more of that in the full game. There's a little bit of that in the quick start. Each kin and also each profession, which are kind of like classes, have unique abilities. So each character will have one kin ability and one profession ability that are unique. So that combo will, of course, be specific to your character. But the full game will also add something we would call heroic abilities, which are kind of apart from the skills, which everyone has the same, not the same skill levels, obviously, but the same set of skills. But then you have these heroic abilities, which will give you something special, something different, a way to fine tune a character and make it stand out. So that is something that is coming in the full game that you won't see in the quick start.
Excellent. Terrier Halo asks, is it Daimon? Is that the rather really old adventure from the first years that they talked about in Kamratposten once upon a time?
Yeah, that Kamratposten is kind of a youth magazine that was, I think it's still around, but it was a big thing back then. It's kind of a kids magazine. Yeah, Dimön, that means the Isle of Mist, and that is one of the early adventures for the original Drakar, and it was also written by one of the authors that we have now, Roger Undhagen, who works with us for this edition also. And that is one of the very early classic adventures. If most people who have played Drakar have played Dimön at one point or another. And we are including as a stretch goal for this new edition a kind of a reimagined version of this adventure. The difference is it's not a standalone, completely standalone. It can be standalone, but it's also all of the adventures that we unlock as stretch goals will tie together into a campaign. So this will be part of that. But otherwise, it's a kind of a new edition of one of the most classic Drakar adventures.
Excellent. Yes. How do you differentiate scouting from spot hidden? If scouting is about stealth, how is it separate from sneaking? And if it's about outdoorsmanship, how is it separate from survival?
Yeah, that's a good specific question.
It is.
Yeah. The idea basically is that spot hidden is something you use when you kind of search a room or something, whereas scouting is something you do when it's used to spot sneaking enemies. I mean, it's more of a passive role. You roll it when to spot something at a distance or to something like that. So they're used a little bit differently, but of course there can be areas where they might overlap a little bit. But that's kind of the general idea, that spot hidden is more for active searches, whereas scouting is more of a passive role to spot stuff that is happening around you.
Let's see here. Mike asks, I prefer to run games in my own fantasy setting. How suitable is Dragonbane for this?
Yeah, I would say it's really well suited for that, because it does not have, and that is very intentional, it doesn't have a huge detailed fantasy world. The world is not the game. This is we intentionally avoid having a big world map or something, because we want to create, it's more of a sense of adventure, and that you have we instead have, it's more of a micro setting. So the introductory campaign that I mentioned is set in a secluded valley that you come into, but what's outside of that valley is never really defined. So that leaves a lot of room to create your own world and place it where you want in your world. Or just use the rule system in a completely different setting if you like, or take the individual adventures and place them in somewhere else. That is completely doable, and that's something we want this game to be. It does not have a huge world that you have to read up on before playing. So it works really well if you want to use it in another setting as well.
Mark asks, hello from Quebec, Canada. Hello, Mark. You're just a little bit north of me, so welcome. I'm mostly curious about character progression. Do professions get additional abilities over time?
Yeah, I mean, progression, since it's not level-based, what happens is that progression is done through, two main ways. The one is skill level increase, because it's a skill-based system. So you have a number of skills, around 20 in number, and you will increase your skill levels basically, and that is a process all on its own. The other way to progress your character is to gain new abilities, and those are the heroic abilities that I mentioned, that give you special things that you could not otherwise do, or special bonuses in certain situations and so on. And the idea is even that you can gain profession abilities from other professions, basically kind of classing, if you will. That will also be possible if you want a thief warrior type person. That would probably be doable as well, because that is also what part of the tradition within Drakar och Demoner is that character progression is very open. Traditionally in that game, that you don't have career paths for specific classes or anything like that. It's much more open. You can kind of develop your character in any which way you want. So our version is also like that, even though we have actually added the professional abilities, which is existed in some early versions, some of the early versions, but not all of them. But we still want to keep progression fairly open so that your character can go in any path that they want to.
Excellent. Let's see what the Darth Lumlum asks. What was your thought process regarding minor magic and having an associated cost? A lot of flavor of playing a magic user for me in the past has been having these free.
Yeah, those are the kind of the minor magic, or magic tricks we call them. I guess they're similar to cantrips if you play other games, but we have the way it works now. There is a small cost because basically you spend willpower points to cast magic spells. That's kind of the basic of it. And yes, even these minor magic tricks cost 1 point of willpower. So there is a cost, but it's quite minor. I guess the reasoning there is that even these magic tricks, as we call them, they are not just flavor. They are partly flavor and stuff you do for to kind of embellish a scene or something. You can definitely use them, but they also have an actual usable effect. And since they have an effect that actually can be helpful in different dramatic situations, we felt it made sense to also have some cost related to them. But it's so small that it will hardly take away your ability to use more powerful spells as well. It's just a single point of willpower, so of which you will probably, if you're a wizard, you will probably have 15 to 20 of those points. So it's still a small portion of the total that you'll need to spend. That is the thinking, but of course the game is still in development, so things can still change.
And this is Raymond has a question. And this is something that's been mentioned on the Kickstarter already. Question: how will the third-party content setup work?
Yeah, we don't know exactly. I mean, we don't have this super detailed rules for it yet. But basically, we want to keep it as simple as possible and as open as possible. So basically, anyone will be able to write something for DRAGONBANE or Drakar och Demoner. It's in English or Swedish, I guess. As long as you publish it, you can publish it in print or in PDF. It will not only be Drive-Thru-RPG or something like that. It's going to be completely free where and how you publish it, as long as you follow a few simple rules. We need some level of at least control of what is published and not. But basically, it's going to be very open, very simple, quite similar to what the Mörkborg are doing with their third-party license. It's going to be fairly similar to that. I think the only major limitation, I guess, is that it's only for modules, adventures, settings, even additional rules. But it's everything that's published under this license needs to kind of build on the core game. So you can't publish your own version of Drakar och Demoner under this license. That's not going to be possible. That's the only limitation, really.
Excellent. Terry Halo asks, the adventures already talked about, how many sessions will they be in length, or will they be quite varied?
Yeah, the adventures that are unlocked now in the Kickstarter, they're fairly short, and that's very intentional. That's because we want to get quite a few of them into the core game that, kind of makes it necessary for them to be short. But also this play style that we discussed, and the fact that you want to be able to run this as a one-shot and run it quite quickly. So for that reason, we are also keeping them short. So basically, when in playtesting, we have, for the most part, been able to run an adventure in a single session. And that's kind of the idea here, that these adventures are short enough to be able to actually run them in a single session. But that's also because the system is fast. that the texts are very much to the point. We work a lot with, to make sure you don't have to hunt for information. It should all be very clear and very easy to find the information you need as the game master, and they're fast to play. So basically the idea is that they should be playable in a single session, each adventure. Perhaps you won't, if you want to drag it, embellish a bit more, and you can certainly play them for 2 to 3 sessions if you want to. It kind of depends on how long the sessions are and then your play style. But the idea is that they should at least be possible to play in a single evening.
Excellent. Stig asks, what is the connection between attributes and skills? I noticed some skills have an attribute listed next to them. For example, scouting has. Does int affect scouting in game terms?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a bit of a different tradition in terms of the rules design from for example, the Year Zero engine games, and that's because we chose this core game mechanic because it's kind of part of the tradition of Drakar och, and we didn't want to change that. We did our own take on that game engine. That it has not been identical throughout all of these 10 editions. It's changed around quite a bit. The core is still there, and I mean the very, very first edition of Drakar och was a translation of Magic World by Chaosium, which was kind of a simplified version of RuneQuest. So it still has something, a core that is kind of still similar to that type of engine. And so it's skill based. It's a roll under system, but it uses a D20 instead of a D100, and lots of other differences. But it's still, and in a system like this, traditionally, and it's still partly there in our version, is that you use the attribute levels to calculate, or it's very simple. It's not lots of math, but still you base your initial starting skill levels on your attributes. But once you have your skill levels, you basically roll against the skill level, and you don't really use the attributes as such very much when playing. And that's there are some uses for them, but generally you don't roll using the attributes. You roll against your skill level. But however, there's one thing that we have changed here and made a bit different, and that where the attributes do come into play a little bit, and that's we have as an optional rule, you can push rolls as in the Year Zero engine games. And when you do that, you have to take a condition, and there are 6 conditions. Each condition is connected to one of the attributes. So you can choose what condition you want when you push a roll to kind of create the narrative that you want. If you want to get, there's a condition that is angry, another one is, exhausted, another one is scared. So you can kind of choose your reaction to the situation, and then you also get this condition. And each condition gives you something called a bane, kind of a penalty to rolls using skills that are connected to that specific attribute. So if you're scared, you will get a bane, a penalty to all skill rolls for skills connected to the intelligence attribute. So scouting, for instance, in this example. So there are connections, and the attributes are affected through conditions mostly. That's kind of how it works. It's probably easier to see in the full game once it's out, but then to explain it here. But basically, that's how it works.
Nice. Terry Halo asks, I wondered if this was going to come up. Will there be a cookbook stretch goal? I think it's time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. We all, that's yeah.
That's so a go-to stretch goal, right?
It's gonna be in the next batch. No cookbook. Yeah.
Darth Lumlum asks, will adventurers be able to get multiple attacks, parries, blocks per round apart from dragon rolls?
Right. This is another good question. This is something we've been discussing quite a bit because there is kind of the action economy, and that's a lot of back and forth, a lot of play testing about this. Because in the system that it works, you basically have to choose whether you want to attack or parry. You can rarely do both.
Sure.
And that can be seen as quite harsh because it's kind of a hard choice. And if you don't parry, you're kind of opening yourself up to attacks. But we felt that this actually works quite well in actual play, and it makes combat fast and quite deadly, which is exactly what we want. So we feel this works well as a basis to have this kind of action economy. There's more to it, but basically that's it. But if you want, through these heroic abilities that we discussed earlier, it will be possible once you reach that level that you start, earning these heroic abilities. Some of them will allow you to make multiple attacks from multiple parries in the single round. So through heroic abilities, you will be able to do that, but it's not something anyone can do.
Yoel says, this makes me feel like a 9-year-old kid again. It removes 39 years from my age.
That is quite the accomplishment. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Let's see here. This game is using a grid layout on maps instead of zones seen in most Free League games, and the hexes used in Twilight 2000. Was this done to be more in line with the history of the game?
Yes, I guess that's a short answer. Yeah, I mean, the early editions had a grid to like 2 by 2 meter grids. Basically, that was kind of the standard back then, and it has remained that, I guess. So it makes sense to keep it for this version as well. At least we felt so that it was in line with the tradition of earlier editions. And again, it was kind of a fun challenge to create a system that works like this rather than our usual way of doing things with zones in several user engine games, apart from Twilight 2000, which has the hexes. But yeah, we felt this was right for this game. It doesn't mean every game from now on will do the same. It's just right for this particular game.
Darth Lumlum asks, forced rolls are an optional rule, like you said. Are there other optional rules so players can choose the complexity of their playing experience?
Yes, there's quite a few optional rules. I think there's already some in the quick start, and that's also very intentional, that we want this game to be very fast and easy to get into. And if you played it for the first time, you can just ignore those optional rules and it'll be even faster. It also gives a way to players, perhaps more on people that have played a lot of Drakar och, so mostly on the Swedish side, I guess. They can tweak the system a bit more to their taste, because in that community, of course, everyone has their own idea of what the perfect Drakar och is. So basically, this is also a way of opening up the system a bit, so you can pick and choose which rules you want to use to get the perfect version or combination that you think is best.
Simon wants to know, looking very much forward to the game. Question: will there be any new other playable races compared to the 2016 version?
I believe it's basically the same races or kin, as they are called in our version.
Yeah.
And those are basically the classic ones from Drakar och. So there's no change here, and that's also why they were in the previous edition. So it's basically your kind of expected, you have the humans, you have the halflings, the dwarves, the elves. But then you also add kind of 2 anthropomorphic animals, which have always been, or for pretty much from the start, has been part of Drakar och. And those are the wolfkin, which you might know from Forbidden Lands, kind of, and then you have they go by different names. In the official term is mallards. We're using in DRAGONBANE, but basically they're walking, talking ducks. So those are also going to be in there. Yeah, we're not planning any other playable races at this time, but we might add them later on. We'll see.
Excellent. Alan would like to know, I may be in the minority here, but can all editions, whatever the language, be called the Swedish version, even if it's only for the Kickstarter editions?
Yeah, I mean, we saw quite a few comments on that on the Kickstarter, and yeah, we get it. It would be fun in a sense, and it would be kind of a weird exotic name, I guess, that could be. Sure. Could work. I mean, why not? I mean, Merc Borg does it, so obviously that can be done, definitely. So, but yeah, I think in the end, we feel it might not be right for this game in the long run, because we want this game to be easy and accessible to everyone, and even if you don't have an interest in weird, strange languages from countries far away. So we feel that there might be in the long run, it might be an impediment to have a very odd name like that for this game. That's not really in line with what we're trying to do. So that is, and then of course it might not be ideal. It might be confusing, at least, to have a game that goes by D and D. I don't think that would be that could be confusing and problematic for a variety of reasons. So I don't think the short answer is no, we're not doing that.
Mick would like to know, he says he's looking forward to the game. Any chance of putting together some miniatures to match the game? That's a question right there.
That's a good question. Yeah, never say never. I mean, it's definitely, I think the art style that Johan has kind of lends itself quite well to miniatures, and he's also a huge miniature painter. So it's so yeah, it would be cool. It's not going to be part of the Kickstarter. I mean, making miniatures, it's very much a big project on its own. So it's not something you slap on at this stage.
Sure.
That would just be impossible and would delay things horribly. So no, we're not doing it right now, but down the line, it's certainly possible. Sure.
And then we got a question from someone that I don't know if we know this person, but somebody named John Marin.
That guy.
That guy, yeah. John, of course, helps us out at a lot of conventions, so we're just giving him a hard time.
Yeah, he's a part of the family.
Great guy. Also, can we get a dragon symbol on the 1 and a demon symbol on the 20 on the dice?
Yeah, maybe. We're looking into it. That's all I can say.
Excellent. Jason asks, just curious about character creation. How are attributes determined in the respective derived attributes, movement, etc.? Roll 3d6 or a point system?
The system that we use, in the rules, the full rules, it's you roll up your attributes. That also kind of goes back to Dr. Mona tradition, but it's not completely random. You don't roll 3d6 for each, and they just end up where they want. It's basically you roll, if I remember correctly now, and don't you roll 4d6s. You take away the lowest die. That will kind of up your general scores to make them a bit higher than average on average. And then for each roll you make, you place it on one of your 6 attributes. And that's a bit, you don't roll 6 times and then place them. You have to place them as you roll. That is kind of a version that we found gave the most fun. But because it's a bit of a risk reward thing, if you have a fairly high roll, you might want to, do I place that on the stat I want to have a high score in, or do I wait and hope to get an even better roll? So that's kind of a small little fun mini game when you roll up your stats. That's the official way to do it, but this thing is something that, I think it's very easy to house rule. If you prefer to roll it up completely randomly or even use a point buy system, as long as you kind of stay in the same range, that works fine. So, but the official way of doing it is what I described, with rolling it up with 4 d6s and taking away the lowest one.
Franny wants to know, does this re-release include the so slap mini magic cantrip that was in one of the older editions? So you'll have to explain that a little. That question.
I think that was one of the. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of early editions. I think there was one. Well, I think it was called. Örfil. That basically, a slap, like slapping someone with. Yeah, exactly like that. So I'm not sure it's in yet, but the magic system is still under construction. So we'll see if it, if it what happens in the end, and if it turns up there, we'll see.
Nice. Johan would like to know, when will character sheets be available on Roll20? I'd love to try out the Quick Start rulebook. My group only plays Roll20, which we should mention that the Roll20 and Foundry modules have been unlocked for this game.
Yeah. Yes, so we will be developing Foundry and Roll20 modules and systems, official systems and character sheets and everything for both Foundry and Roll20 for DRAGONBANE and the Swedish version as well. So that's all coming. That will take a bit of time, though. There is, at least I would assume a few months before we have the official stuff up and running. But I think there is no. Because I know on Roll20 there's a lot of community created character sheets and things. So if anyone who wants to kind of create a character sheet use, I think that's just no problem. Go ahead and just do that. But the official one will probably take a few months before it's in place.
Retro DM Ray asks, Tomas, what is your fantasy reading inspiration? Your appendix N ? And then the second question is, if stats are 3 through 18, barring profession and kin adjustments, is that rolled on 3 or 4? Oh, we already asked that. Yep. So I guess the first question is probably
yes, it's rolled on 3 or 4. Yeah.
But
yes.
what is your fantasy reading inspiration? I guess is probably the
all kinds of stuff. Right now, I'm actually reading the Earthsea books by Ursula Le Guin. I haven't actually. That's kind of embarrassing, but I have not read them before, so I'm reading them now. I figure better late than never. I'm really enjoying that, and they have a tone that actually feels a little bit like Dr. Mono, because it's epic but still kind of grounded, and that's always been, I think, a difference between Dr. Mono and D&D. I think that D&D has always been a bit more high-powered, high fantasy, epic stuff, and Dr. Mono has always been a bit more grounded, a bit more down to earth. Even though epic stuff can happen, it's still your typical adventure is a bit more low fantasy than the super high fantasy. And I think there is something there also in the Earthsea stuff that feels I feel the connection.
Bill would like to know, how quickly will published adventures begin to be released after the Kickstarter ships? That's probably a good question too. Just like, do we have now that we've seen the response for this Kickstarter, have we already started kind of initially kind of planning out subsequent products?
Yeah, sure. Yes, definitely. I mean, this is a game that we will be supporting, of course. And the idea there is a few classic. I mentioned a few of them, like early adventures that were made and campaigns that were made. So we'll be making new editions that kind of reimagine those classic adventures and campaigns. So that's already in the works, the first one, and then we'll have completely new content as well. Mostly in adventures, but we'll see maybe other types of supplements as well. But yeah, how quickly after that remains to be seen. But we really want to have a fairly quick release schedule for this. So if we ship the backers sometime next, I mean, hopefully before August. It says August in the Kickstarter. We hope to be able to do it faster, but I mean, assuming it's around there or middle of next year, if we could have something new out before the end of next year, that would be great. Not a promise, but that's kind of what we would hope to be able to do.
Darth Lumum asks, how is the new version with regards to representation to minorities and indigenous groups, LGBTQIA, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, this game is in that sense, it's not different from our other games that we feel that, I mean, role-playing is for everyone, and we don't want to exclude groups by only showing, specific types of characters in our games and only featuring, So definitely that we want an inclusive game, and this one is absolutely no different from that. So that's the goal. Whether we succeed all the way, and we can always improve and do better, and we that's something we're always working on and mindful of. So that is definitely the intent for this version of this game and all of the other games that we make.
Bill asks, is there a timeline for Free League Workshop submissions? Will writers be able to develop and publish adventures there before the physical boxes ship? That's a good question. We saw that happen with Cyborg. People are already putting out content for that game with the. So yeah,
and we had the same for Twilight 2000 also. We actually opened it up. We opened it up on the Free League Workshop before the game shipped. We just felt that was great for backers because they had the PDF 6 months before they got the physical boxed set, and to have them be able to create stuff and publish things in the meantime, we felt was great. So yeah, possibly we could see the same thing here. We'll see. We haven't really decided anything on that front yet, but to my mind, I see no reason, at least as PDFs, we could have allow PDFs to be published by third-party creators or fan community content before the physical printed boxes arrive. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
The Advanced Age Role-Playing Gamers asks, I see a lot of mentions of the humor of the game, having not played the original. How is humor a part of the game?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think it's important to know that it's not a comedy game. It's not like, I just saw the other day there's, they announced the Monty Python game. That sounds interesting to me. Anyway, so this is not that. This is not and it's not, back in the 80s, I had that game called Toon, which you played cartoon films, basically, or cartoons. This is not that either. It's not a comedy game. It's still, it's you play it straight. It's definitely for epic adventures and suspense and everything. So the setting and the style and the tone does leave openings for a bit of fun and laughs and silliness. You have Duck as a playable race, and it sets a tone where it lends itself to playing games where you're not super serious, which can be a nice change of pace if you play other games. I mean, I love serious games as well. I mean, the other game I've been working on this year mostly is Blade Runner, which is that's a serious game. But this is a nice change of pace from that for me, and I think for players also. And exactly how the humor comes in, I mean, of course, it can be characters which have some comedic aspect of their personality, or the way or there can be stuff that happens in your adventures that are a bit on the silly side in some instances, but exactly how much you dial that up is also very much part up to the group. But yeah, I mean, if you want a grim dark game, this is probably not the right one. If you want something that is you'll laugh a lot at the table, this might be the one for you.
Nice. Mike asks, how soon after the Kickstarter close do you think it will be before the full rules are released in PDF?
Right. Yeah, we had initially hoped to have them done so that basically they could be shared just a few weeks as soon as the Kickstarter cleared and everything was done. It looks like we need a little bit more time, but definitely before the end of the year.
Nice.
And
okay.
Also, and that will probably be, it's possible also that will publish like the full rules and some more adventures, but then all of the adventures, because we have unlocked so many now that it might be a step thing where we actually release a PDF which is all of the rules, but some of the adventures are still missing, and then we do another PDF that adds those final adventures and so on. So, but yeah, the absolute goal, I mean, that's definitely what we want to do, is to get the full PDF out there before the end of the year.
You'll ask, how did it feel working on a BRP derived system? Did it feel like coming full circle since you started playing BRP systems when you started playing RPGs?
Oh yeah, it was fun. I mean, like I mentioned, it's a kind of a fun challenge, because there was definitely a time before, when on the early Free League days, where I kind of moved, and even before that I kind of moved away from this. If you want to call it BRP, that's not really perhaps technically correct in this case. I wouldn't, whether this is that. It's not really. It's kind of similar. It comes from the same school of thought, but it's its own thing. But let's call it that. Yes, that is the first games I played were definitely of that tradition. They were, the first early editions of Dr. Moon, and also early editions of Mutant, which is what we made into Mutant Year Zero later on. So, but then there was definitely a time where I felt that type of game mechanic doesn't really work for me anymore. I think it's outdated. I think it's old, and there's lots better ways of doing things, and a lot of that grew into Mutant Year Zero and the Year Zero engine, but then so moving back into this type of game mechanic has been a bit of a challenge, but also a fun one, because I think there's definitely, I mean, every game mechanic has its benefits and its drawbacks, and this one is no different. So it's mostly a matter of using it to its best advantage, to try to minimize the negative sides of it, and kind of play up the good stuff and make it work. So that's been the design challenge here, and it's been a fun one. I mean, I think it's also a danger. I felt that I mean, we got some comments on why we, in Twilight 2000 and Blade Runner, used a different version of the Year Zero engine that does not use D6 dice pools, but something different. And that we want to try new things and try to do things differently so that we want to keep what's good and keep developing it, but not do the exact same thing every time. I don't think that would, in the end, if we don't move forward and try new stuff, we will eventually become doing, just derivatives of our previous work, and it will no longer be very interesting. So definitely trying new stuff and pushing boundaries and doing things in new ways is definitely part of how we approach game design.
I love that. Let's see here. Stefan wants to know, will you release any products set in the campaign world? Is it Ereb Altor?
Yeah, that is one of the classic, or perhaps the classic campaign world that was released for Drakar back in the 80s. It was not like there originally. It was added on a few years later, but a lot of people who played Drakar are very much invested in this campaign world, and and I was too. I mean, this was a cool thing. I mean, it was like the first time a whole fantasy world was kind of thought up for this game. Before that, it was much more, undefined. So possibly we're not, for reasons I discussed earlier, we're not having a full campaign world here because we want something more accessible and we want people to make this their own. So we're not doing that, at least not initially. So. But we'll see what happens down the line. Obviously, if that's something that a lot of people want, we could potentially develop that later on. And it's also entirely possible in terms of the third-party content that there will be setting modules done by others, which is, I think, a great way of doing it. Because then you can probably get a variety of settings that you can choose from.
Stig asks, are there any plans to release a monster manual / bestiary type of book for Dragonbane? That's a good question.
Certainly it's among the things that we are discussing and could do. It's not in the immediate near future.
Sure.
There's going to be a meaty bestiary in the core game, so that will get you fairly far. And initially, I think we want to focus on adventures, but yeah, definitely a cool monster manual down the line is certainly definitely
Sure.
possible. Yeah.
Darth Lemon says, thanks for amazing answers. Thank you for amazing questions.
Thank you for good questions. Yeah,
absolutely. Let's see here. Board Stiff says, able to give us a little teaser for the next grouping of stretch goals?
Yeah, they're kind of closing in, aren't they? Yeah, fairly. We'll see when it's time. But we have a few more that we think will be nice. Some of them have been discussed in the comments as suggestions, so they're fairly, I think the ones that have been kind of guessed at are not completely wrong. So yeah, it's what I can say. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's going to continue to be kind of a variety of stuff. Some nice. Things more physical, some more content-wise, something digital. So yeah, it's a bit of, we try to keep a spread of different types of stretch goals, so we don't just focus on one thing.
Yes. Lee asks, or Lee says, not a question, but please add the cat people that Phoenix Magazine added to DoD 2016 sometime.
Yeah, there was even the cat people in the added in one of the monster manuals, I believe, the second one for the original Drakar. So that the cat people have been around, yeah. So we'll see if we add more playable races. Why not a cat people? I have cats. I like cats most of the time. Yeah.
Tomas, anything you're most excited about for this new version?
Lots of stuff, but personally, I'm really, really excited about the core game, obviously, and the campaign there, but also that I mentioned the new edition of the. There's an early campaign called Ärans väg, Path of Glory, that Roger Unhagen is also part of the project now, wrote, and to kind of reimagine that campaign and make a new edition of that and play that. I'm really looking forward to that. That's also what we're going to be starting to play test very soon internally. So I'm personally very excited just to play it.
Excellent. Let's see here. We're kind of running up on time, so I'm trying to just go through the questions to see if there's anything that hasn't been. This is a question that's been asked quite a bit in the comments, and I figure we might as well address it here in this chat.
Good.
Any chance for hardback books, either in the Kickstarter or later?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, I think at the start, we decided on a boxed set for this one because we want to have that kind of immediate accessibility for the game. And having hardback books inside a boxed set, it's not impossible. We did it for Forbidden Lands, so it's clearly doable, but it's not necessarily ideal for a variety of reasons. One of which is cost. Sure, that's part of it. They would probably mean the game would need to be more expensive, at least in retail, which is, we don't want this to be a very expensive game. We want it to have a fairly low price point because we want many people to try it. It's going to be heavier, which makes it more difficult to transport it. And it's going to take more space in the box itself. So I think there are some drawbacks of having hardback books inside a boxed set. So we're not planning on that at this point. But, there could potentially down the line be, editions, like a special edition of the game where you just have a hardback book instead of a box set or something. That could be done, but it's not going to be part of the Kickstarter now. That, potentially if there's a lot of people who want it, we could certainly consider it later on.
And that's one thing that I really enjoyed about this when I was looking at the Kickstarter, like the box set alone, like the pledge in US dollars is $38, which is I think an amazing. It seems like an amazing value on my end because I think that's there's a lot of products out there for $38 that don't provide as much material as what's going to be included in that box set.
Yeah.
So. I actually enjoyed the fact that it was a kind of a lower price point than what we're usually putting out for pledge levels. Let's see here. We'll take one more question or two more questions. Henrik asks, will Animate Dead be in the base system?
As a spell, I guess.
Yeah.
I would assume. In the base system, I would say no. Probably not. We're still working on the magic system, but we have in the core game, there are schools of magic in this game, and I think like something like necromancy is not going to be part of the core 3. We'll have 3 schools of magic in the core game, and I don't think necromancy will be one of them. But definitely, that is like one of the areas we will be expanding in later on, and that will also be expanded in third-party content, but also official content with more schools of magic, and of course, necromancy is. Sooner or later, you have to go there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mike, we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll call it a session. Mike asks, any chance of a 6th pre-gen character for this quick start? Some of us have larger groups, and it would be also good for convention games. That's true.
Right. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. To my mind, 6 players is a bit much, but that's a matter of personal taste, obviously, as well. So I think we tested this with typically 4 players plus the GM, sometimes just 3. 5 players, I think, is fine. 6 players is a stretch to my mind, but it's not impossible. It's certainly possible, but then it might slow the game down a bit, which is something that we. But yeah, so it's we'll see. We don't have one, I have to write it up, but that's certainly possible. It's not. I'll keep it. I'll take this idea with me and see what we can do.
Patty asks, will adventure sites be in the game, similar to our Forbidden Lands?
Not exactly in the same way. In Forbidden Lands, you have the adventure sites, which are structured in a specific way, and they are. And they're meant to be interacted with in various ways, and they have that whole philosophy behind them. Here it's similar in the sense that we have more. I think DRAGONBANE will have a bit more traditional adventures, if you will. They are, which makes it a bit easier to play, maybe. But they are also location based to give that amount of freedom to players to explore a place the way you want. But you have a little bit more support, I guess, than in the Forbidden Lands adventure sites, which are very open, which is the point. Here, it's a bit more, rails to hold on to, but it's not linear. It's still that's the idea, at least, to have a possibility to explore this the adventure in different ways. So it's similar in a sense, but not exactly the same.
Excellent. All right, I think that's going to do it for this session. I will remind folks that if you're coming across this session for the very first time and you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that subscribe button. We like to do sessions like these pretty regularly. Summer was really busy, so we kind of had to work on some things and be at some conventions, so we haven't quite been as available as we'd like to, but we're going to try to amp that and pick that back up here now that things are kind of slowing down a little bit. But yeah, feel free to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this session, please hit that like button, so then that way that helps push this video up so it's seen through the YouTube algorithms and all of that. Tomas, before we close, is there anything you'd like to say to backers and to the folks that are watching this?
I think we covered a lot of stuff. I think one general point that could be made is that, of course, we are also hard at work on all of our other games. So
Yes.
that I think that is worth repeating, that even a new game like this doesn't mean we drop all the old ones. So there's going to be news for several other games pretty soon. Twilight 2000 we should have more stuff on that very, very soon, and the other titles as well.
We'll have to schedule a Free League update here before too long. So, all right, folks, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. We hope your dice rolls do not have to be pushed. Bye now.
Bye.